Two white police officers handcuffed a black woman in a crowded cafe, right in front of stunned customers. But they had no idea that just days later, she would be the one deciding their fate. Rebecca Lawson stepped into Maple Cafe, a cozy but crowded spot in downtown Denver, Colorado. It was late Sunday afternoon. Soft chatter filled the room as customers sipped coffees and tapped gently on laptops. Rebecca moved confidently to the counter, her expression calm, professional. She ordered a latte, paying with her card, then found a quiet table by the window. Without hesitation, she opened her laptop, pulling up legal documents for an upcoming court session. Across the cafe, officers Jim Hudson and Tom Sanders sat observing patrons. Hudson, mid-40s, leaned back casually, eyes narrowing slightly as Rebecca settled in. Sanders, younger and more restless, tapped his fingers on the table. Both officers watched Rebecca closely, exchanging subtle glances of skepticism as she continued her preparations, unaware of their scrutiny. Hudson leaned toward Sanders, his voice low but edged with suspicion. "What's she doing here?" Sanders gave a half shrug, eyebrows raised slightly, silently echoing the question. Their gazes remained fixed on Rebecca, tension quietly building beneath their neutral expressions, as she typed calmly on her laptop, completely unaware that she had already become a target of their suspicion. Officer Jim Hudson glanced again at Rebecca from across the cafe. Without further hesitation, he stood up abruptly, signaling Tom Sanders to follow. Both officers crossed the cafe, weaving through tables and customers who shifted their gaze curiously toward the uniformed men. Rebecca looked up calmly as the officers approached her table. Hudson cleared his throat, authoritative, but intentionally loud enough for nearby customers to overhear. "Afternoon, ma'am," Hudson said. "Mind if we ask what brings you here?" Rebecca maintained eye contact, her voice steady. "I'm having a coffee, officer. Is that a problem?" Hudson smiled, not warmly, more condescending than friendly. "We've received a call about someone acting suspiciously in this area. Just routine, but we'll need to see some ID." Rebecca reached slowly into her purse, retrieving her driver's license and handing it over without protest. Tom Sanders took the ID, examining it closely. Hudson eyed her open laptop, his tone edged with sarcasm. "What exactly are you working on there? Preparing some kind of lawsuit?" Rebecca didn't flinch. "My work is confidential. Is there a legitimate reason you're interrupting me?" Sanders exchanged glances with Hudson, slight irritation evident. Nearby, a woman paused mid-sip, clearly listening in. A few other customers now stared openly. Hudson leaned in slightly, lowering his voice but maintaining the sharpness in his tone. "We have reports of suspicious behavior. Your refusal to cooperate isn't helping." Rebecca spoke calmly, but clearly, aware of the growing audience. "I've cooperated fully, officers. You asked for my ID, I provided it. You asked what I was doing here, I answered. What exactly is your suspicion based on?" Hudson hesitated briefly, visibly annoyed by her calm and composed response. Sanders, sensing Hudson's tension, interjected more bluntly. "Look, ma'am, we're just doing our jobs. If you'd stop giving us a hard time." Rebecca interrupted gently, but firmly. "I'm simply asking you to clarify what I've done that warrants this attention." Sanders' face tightened. Hudson, clearly losing patience, motioned towards Rebecca's handbag beside her laptop. "Do you mind if we check your bag?" Rebecca shook her head firmly. "Actually, yes, I do mind. I haven't done anything wrong." Hudson stepped forward assertively, ignoring her statement. He reached for her bag, and Rebecca instinctively placed her hand over it. "I'm sorry, officers, but you need a warrant to search my belongings." Hudson's voice hardened, his tone now openly hostile. "We don't need a warrant if we suspect something criminal." Rebecca held her ground, speaking directly, clearly, to ensure those nearby heard. "That's not true. I know my rights. You do need probable cause and a warrant. Otherwise, this search would be unlawful." Hudson paused, glancing around at the curious onlookers, his voice dropping slightly. "We can take you down to the station and continue this there, if you prefer." Rebecca didn't break eye contact. "On what grounds?" Tom Sanders leaned closer, irritation evident in his voice. "If you don't cooperate, we'll consider it obstructing justice." Around the cafe, whispers began to ripple through the crowd. A man nearby subtly raised his phone, aiming its camera at the interaction unfolding before them. Hudson caught the motion, tensing momentarily before refocusing on Rebecca. Rebecca maintained her composure, though her jaw tightened slightly. "I'm well within my rights to refuse an unwarranted search. You're stepping over the line." Hudson, increasingly agitated, glanced at Sanders, who nodded slightly in agreement. Hudson reached for Rebecca's arm abruptly. "Stand up. You're coming with us." Rebecca didn't resist physically, but her voice rose sharply, making sure everyone in the cafe heard clearly. "You're violating my rights. I haven't done anything illegal." Nearby, customers stared in shock as the tension in the cafe peaked. Hudson gripped Rebecca's arm firmly, pulling her to her feet, ignoring the shocked reactions from the cafe patrons. Rebecca remained calm despite the sudden escalation, aware of the eyes and phones directed toward them. Tom Sanders reached swiftly for his handcuffs, causing murmurs of disbelief from nearby customers. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back," he ordered bluntly. Rebecca spoke clearly, loud enough for all to hear. "This is unnecessary." "I'm not resisting. You're making a mistake." Sanders ignored her words, firmly securing the cuffs around her wrists. The metallic click echoed sharply through the now silent cafe. Customers sat frozen, phones discreetly recording the unfolding confrontation. A younger woman near the window whispered urgently to the person beside her, "She didn't do anything wrong. Why are they arresting her?" Rebecca turned slightly, making direct eye contact with Hudson, her voice steady and authoritative despite her disadvantaged position. "You're going to regret this decision, officers. I haven't violated any laws." Hudson glared back, his voice low but clearly audible. "Keep quiet. We'll handle this downtown." From nearby tables, several patrons raised their voices slightly, murmuring their confusion and disapproval. An older man addressed the officers cautiously. "Excuse me, officers, but what's she done?" Hudson, irritated by the mounting attention, snapped back without turning around. "Stay out of this." Sanders quickly gathered Rebecca's belongings, carelessly shoving her laptop and papers into her bag. Rebecca winced slightly at the rough handling but maintained her dignity, refusing to protest further. As Hudson led her toward the exit, Sanders close behind carrying her belongings, the younger woman near the window stood up abruptly, smartphone pointed steadily at the scene, clearly recording. Hudson noticed the phone, stepping toward the woman aggressively. "Put that down. There's nothing here for you to film." The woman, startled but defiant, held her ground. "I'm allowed to film this. She hasn't done anything wrong." Sanders pulled Hudson back slightly, muttering quietly, "Forget it, Jim. Let's get out of here." Rebecca glanced around as Hudson guided her forcefully to the door. The cafe's patrons stared back with expressions ranging from confusion to anger. The woman filming remained standing, capturing every detail. Outside, the sidewalk was busy. Passers-by stopped abruptly at the unusual sight. Rebecca was led toward the police car parked conspicuously nearby. Hudson roughly guided her into the back seat, closing the door firmly. Sanders placed her belongings in the trunk, visibly uncomfortable as more onlookers gathered, observing and recording the events. Inside the vehicle, Rebecca sat upright, still calm, but visibly disturbed by the injustice. Hudson climbed into the driver's seat, muttering angrily under his breath. Sanders joined in the passenger seat, glancing nervously at the surrounding crowd. "That got out of control fast," Sanders muttered, uneasy. Hudson started the car, his voice cold and defensive. "She brought that on herself. Thinks knowing a little law means she's untouchable." Rebecca heard the exchange clearly from the back seat, choosing not to respond, instead staring straight ahead, a quiet but firm resolve settling into her expression. Back inside Maple Cafe, patrons discussed what they'd witnessed in hushed, tense voices. The younger woman replayed the video she captured, visibly shaken. She turned to another customer, her voice anxious, deeply troubled. "I recorded everything. She didn't do anything. What just happened here?" Outside, as the police car pulled away from the curb, Rebecca watched through the window, her expression calm yet determined. She understood clearly that this confrontation had escalated into something far more serious than a simple misunderstanding. The woman inside the cafe immediately started uploading the footage online, murmuring quietly to herself, "People need to see this." As the cafe buzzed with heated conversations, the footage began spreading rapidly, capturing immediate attention from the community. Hudson and Sanders drove off, oblivious to the fact that their actions had just set into motion consequences they couldn't yet imagine. Rebecca stepped out of the police precinct, shielding her eyes from the glare of the setting sun. Her colleague, Anna Turner, stood waiting beside her parked car, concern evident on her face. "Rebecca," Anna began cautiously, stepping forward to greet her. "Are you all right?" Rebecca didn't respond immediately. Instead, she opened the passenger door, slid into the seat, and let out a slow breath. Anna quickly climbed into the driver's side, casting a worried glance toward her friend. "I'm fine," Rebecca finally spoke, voice steady despite the strain in her expression. "But we can't let this go. It's unacceptable." Anna started the car quietly, pulling into traffic. "I've already seen the video. It's everywhere. People are angry." Rebecca stared straight ahead, her voice firm but controlled. "Good. They should be—" A brief silence hung in the air, interrupted only by the hum of traffic. Finally, Anna spoke carefully. "So, what's next? Are you planning to sue?" Rebecca's answer was immediate, without hesitation. "Absolutely. I'm filing charges against the department. Not just for me, Anna. This is a chance to force change." Anna glanced over, uncertainty flickering briefly in her eyes. "You know the risk involved, right? You're going up against the police." Rebecca met Anna's gaze calmly, confidently. "That's exactly why it matters. Someone has to show them they're accountable." Anna nodded, clearly still concerned but fully supportive. They drove the rest of the way in silence, tension palpable but unspoken. Back at her apartment, Rebecca immediately began gathering documents, pulling folders from her home office shelves. She spread papers across the dining table, determined and focused. Anna watched quietly, sitting nearby, clearly uncomfortable but respecting Rebecca's silence. Rebecca paused briefly, looking up from the paperwork. "Thanks for standing with me, Anna." "Always," Anna replied softly. "But I have to be honest. You understand what this could do to your career, right? You're challenging the system." Rebecca met Anna's gaze directly, her tone unyielding. "The system needs challenging." Suddenly, Rebecca's phone rang sharply, cutting the quiet room. She answered quickly, placing the call on speaker. The voice was formal, clear, and professional. "Ms. Lawson, this is Judge Hartley's office. I have important news regarding your judicial assignment." Rebecca glanced at Anna, puzzled. "Go ahead." "Due to recent developments, the Judicial Board has appointed you to oversee the internal disciplinary hearing involving officers Jim Hudson and Tom Sanders." Rebecca paused briefly, absorbing the news. Her expression remained composed, but surprise flashed momentarily in her eyes. "I understand," Rebecca responded evenly. "Thank you for letting me know." Ending the call, Rebecca looked at Anna. Anna appeared stunned, struggling momentarily to speak. "They appointed you as judge in their disciplinary hearing?" Anna finally asked incredulously. Rebecca nodded once, her voice calm but firm. "Yes," Anna hesitated, clearly conflicted. "Rebecca, you're directly involved with these officers. Will you be able to remain impartial?" Rebecca stood up slowly, gathering the scattered documents, her face expressionless. She looked Anna straight in the eyes, her voice steady and decisive. "I will do exactly what the law requires. Nothing more, nothing less." Anna sat back, quietly observing her friend, fully understanding the gravity of Rebecca's commitment. Rebecca returned to her laptop, bringing up the video captured at the cafe. She pressed play, watching the recorded incident unfold again. Her eyes narrowed slightly, determination growing stronger. Quietly, she whispered to herself, "Now they'll answer for what they've done." Rebecca replayed the cafe footage, focusing intently on every detail. Officer Hudson's authoritative tone, Officer Sanders' aggressive movements, the shocked expressions of the cafe patrons. She paused the video at the exact moment she was handcuffed, studying the frame closely. Anna moved to Rebecca's side, watching silently. She hesitated before speaking. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Rebecca nodded slowly. "More than ever." Early the next morning, Rebecca walked purposefully into the courthouse, folders tucked neatly under her arm. People moved quickly in and out of rooms, conversations buzzing quietly around her. She kept her gaze forward, composed, fully aware of the curious glances following her. Inside the designated hearing room, court officers prepared chairs and tables, arranging documents methodically. Rebecca approached the bench with professional confidence, reviewing papers carefully. Moments later, a clerk entered, approaching respectfully. "Judge Lawson," he addressed formally. "Everyone is ready." "Shall we begin?" Rebecca nodded, adjusting her robes, stepping onto the elevated platform. As she settled into her chair, the doors opened. Officers Jim Hudson and Tom Sanders entered with their legal representatives, clearly taken aback upon seeing Rebecca seated at the bench. Hudson exchanged tense glances with Sanders, their discomfort obvious. Rebecca watched closely, her expression neutral but observant, noting their unease. The hearing began promptly. Attorneys presented brief opening statements, but Rebecca maintained a strictly neutral demeanor, listening attentively, without reaction. Witnesses were called forward. One young woman from the cafe testified clearly, explaining how Rebecca was calm, compliant, and cooperative. "I couldn't understand why they arrested her," the woman said, visibly upset. Rebecca's gaze shifted briefly to Hudson and Sanders, noting their discomfort. Hudson's lawyer interjected firmly. "My client acted within the scope of his authority." Rebecca's response was measured, her voice steady. "We will examine that carefully, counselor." The video evidence was presented next, played for all to see. The footage clearly captured Hudson's aggressive actions and Sanders' blunt remarks. Hudson shifted uncomfortably in his chair, avoiding Rebecca's eyes, while Sanders stared fixedly downward. Rebecca remained composed, allowing the video to speak for itself. When it concluded, she addressed Hudson directly, calmly, but authoritatively. "Officer Hudson, can you clarify your reasoning for initiating a search without clear justification?" Hudson hesitated, clearly unnerved by her direct questioning. "We received reports of suspicious behavior," he replied defensively. Rebecca pressed firmly, without raising her voice. "Yet, the footage suggests no suspicious or threatening actions by the subject. Do you still believe your actions were justified?" Hudson hesitated visibly. "At that moment, yes," Rebecca considered his answer briefly before responding calmly. Understood. We will proceed. Rebecca moved forward methodically, interviewing other witnesses and reviewing further documentation, maintaining strict impartiality. Still, the growing unease among Hudson and Sanders became increasingly apparent as the evidence mounted against them. After several hours, Rebecca called a brief recess. As the room emptied, Hudson and Sanders exchanged worried looks, clearly recognizing the seriousness of the hearing. Rebecca returned to her chambers, sitting quietly behind her desk. Anna entered softly, concern still evident. "Are you okay?" Anna asked gently. Rebecca met her friend's eyes with a quiet resolve. "I'm fine. They're the ones who should be worried." She glanced down at the paused footage on her laptop again, determination evident in her expression. It's time they faced consequences. The Internal Affairs hearing room was stark and formal, lit by harsh, overhead fluorescent lighting. Officers Jim Hudson and Tom Sanders entered the room together, wearing their uniforms crisply, their steps confident. They exchanged brief, relaxed glances, clearly assuming the hearing was merely procedural. Jim gave a dismissive nod toward their assigned attorney, clearly at ease. "You think they'll wrap this up quickly?" Tom whispered, leaning slightly toward Jim. Jim smirked subtly. "Of course. Just a show. We'll be out of here by lunch." The door opened, drawing everyone's attention immediately. Rebecca Lawson stepped into the room, dressed in official judicial robes, calm and authoritative. Her presence instantly shifted the mood. Jim and Tom both visibly froze in their seats. Their eyes widened slightly in shock, their earlier confidence suddenly gone. Jim leaned toward Tom urgently, voice tense. "What the hell is going on here?" Tom didn't respond, his expression tight with confusion and anxiety. Rebecca took her seat at the bench with deliberate movements, her gaze briefly meeting both officers. She showed no outward emotion, calm, impartial, and completely professional. "Let's begin," Rebecca stated firmly. "We are here today to examine allegations of misconduct against Officers Hudson and Sanders." Jim shifted uncomfortably, glancing nervously toward their lawyer, who quickly stood and spoke with practiced professionalism. "Your Honor, my clients deny any wrongdoing. They acted within their rights to uphold public safety." Rebecca turned directly to Jim, addressing him coldly, but without raising her voice. "Officer Hudson, let's clarify something immediately. Do you consider your authority above the law?" Jim hesitated, clearly unsettled by her direct question. He answered stiffly, trying to mask his discomfort. "Of course not." Rebecca held his gaze steadily, pressing further. "Then perhaps you can explain the justification behind your aggressive approach toward a civilian who posed no apparent threat." Tom interjected defensively, clearly anxious. "We acted on reports we received, Your Honor. We thought—" Rebecca interrupted sharply, eyes fixed on Tom. "Officer Sanders, the issue here isn't what you thought. It's what you did. And whether or not it was lawful." The attorney cleared his throat, attempting to deflect attention. "Your Honor, officers have wide latitude to ensure public safety." Rebecca's response was immediate, calm, yet assertive. "Latitude, yes, but not unlimited power." The lawyer paused, momentarily silenced. Rebecca motioned to the clerk standing nearby. "Please present the video evidence." The lights dimmed slightly as the clerk pressed play on a large monitor, visible to the entire hearing room. Footage from the cafe appeared vividly on the screen. Jim visibly stiffened, watching himself approach Rebecca's table aggressively. Tom shifted in his chair, eyes downcast. The video clearly depicted Jim forcibly searching Rebecca's belongings without clear cause. Customers' voices, audible on the recording, expressed disbelief and confusion. The camera captured Jim's authoritative demands, Tom's harsh tone, and Rebecca's calm but firm resistance. When the video ended, The room remained silent. Rebecca turned back to Jim and Tom, her voice steady, cold, and pointedly clear. "Would you care to reconsider your earlier justification, officers?" Jim swallowed hard, visibly shaken. He hesitated, glancing nervously at Tom, who avoided eye contact entirely. Jim finally spoke, voice weakened. "We believed our actions were justified at the time." Rebecca leaned forward slightly, her tone icy, yet controlled. "Believing something doesn't make it lawful. It appears your judgment severely compromised your ability to uphold your duties responsibly." Jim opened his mouth to respond but stopped himself, clearly uncertain how to justify his actions further. Rebecca straightened, her expression neutral but firm. "Let's continue. Bring in the next witness." Both officers exchanged tense, fearful glances as the courtroom door opened, revealing another individual stepping forward to testify. A young woman walked into the hearing room, clearly uncomfortable but determined. She took her seat at the witness stand, nervously adjusting the microphone. Rebecca addressed her gently but professionally. "Please state your name clearly for the record." "Emma Rodriguez," she answered softly but clearly. Rebecca leaned forward slightly, keeping her voice calm and direct. "Ms. Rodriguez, were you at the Maple Cafe when Officers Hudson and Sanders confronted me?" "Yes," Emma responded, visibly nervous but resolute. Rebecca continued evenly. "Please describe exactly what you witnessed." Emma took a brief breath, steadying herself. "You weren't causing any disturbance. I was sitting near your table. The officers approached aggressively and demanded your ID. You complied immediately, but they escalated things quickly." Rebecca glanced briefly toward Jim and Tom, noting their discomfort. "Did they explain clearly why they confronted me?" Emma shook her head firmly. "Number." "They just kept repeating vague reasons about suspicious behavior. It seemed unfair." "Did the officers use unnecessary force, in your opinion?" Rebecca asked pointedly. Emma nodded immediately. "Absolutely. Officer Hudson grabbed your bag and Officer Sanders handcuffed you without provocation." Jim shifted uneasily, his jaw clenched tightly. Tom stared downward, avoiding eye contact. Rebecca turned toward the officer's attorney. "Do you have any questions for this witness?" The attorney rose cautiously, visibly struggling to find an effective angle. "Ms. Rodriguez, is it possible your perception was influenced by your limited understanding of police procedure?" Emma answered confidently. "Number, it was clear even to bystanders that their actions weren't justified." Rebecca signaled to the clerk again. "Call the next witness." A middle-aged man entered next, clearly agitated. Taking his seat, he immediately glanced at Jim and Tom with obvious disdain. "My name is Anthony Mitchell," he began firmly. "I've encountered these two officers before. They stopped me last month without cause, searched my vehicle, and questioned me aggressively. It felt targeted and unlawful." Rebecca regarded the man calmly. "Did you file a complaint?" Anthony shook his head, frustrated. "Number, I didn't think anyone would listen. But after seeing the video online from the cafe incident, I knew I had to speak up." Jim's composure visibly cracked as Anthony spoke. Tom shrank further in his seat, shoulders tense. Rebecca listened without reaction, maintaining professional neutrality. She turned directly to the officers, her voice clear and deliberate. "Your pattern of behavior has compromised public trust. Your actions aren't merely mistakes. They constitute serious abuses of authority." The attorney stood abruptly, attempting damage control. "Your Honor, these claims are unsubstantiated," Rebecca interrupted sharply. "The video, witness testimony, and previous incidents indicate otherwise. Your client's behavior demonstrates repeated misconduct." Jim, visibly anxious, attempted a final defense. "Your Honor, we were trained to handle situations assertively." Rebecca responded coldly. Assertiveness does not justify unlawful aggression. Your duty is to uphold the law, not violate it. Rebecca took a deliberate breath, addressing the entire room clearly. Officers Hudson and Sanders, effective immediately. You are suspended from active duty pending a complete internal investigation. Jim and Tom sat frozen, stunned into silence. Rebecca delivered her final statement with unequivocal authority. The law does not permit exceptions, even for those who enforce it. It is essential we all recognize clearly, no one stands above justice. Rebecca rose, signaling the conclusion of the hearing. The room erupted in murmurs as the officers remained seated, defeated, and speechless. Rebecca exited calmly, her expression steady and resolved, leaving behind an unmistakable message of accountability. The world can't change if we choose silence in the face of injustice. Today, accountability was upheld, but it's only the beginning. Real change demands courage to speak up, because your silence today can become tomorrow's injustice. Have you witnessed similar situations? Your experiences matter. Share your story in the comments below. And remember, subscribe to this channel. Your voice helps ensure justice for everyone. Together, we can confront wrongdoing, hold power accountable, and prevent abuses from continuing unchallenged. Don't stay quiet. Join us in making sure no one believes they're above the law. Justice depends on voices like yours.